You are listening to the Cresco Wealthcast, a podcast brought to you by Cresco Wealth Management of Wellington Altus Private Wealth. I'm your host, Dimitri Karolis, and I wanted to bring a podcast from the world of wealth that was really just easy to follow. And from time to time, I'm going to be bringing in members of the team. We'll be bringing in external guests and really providing some good information that are inspired from those coffee talk conversations that not just we're having, but that you're having as well. You can follow the podcast on www.cresco.podbean.com, or if you're on Spotify, you can just search for the Cresco Wealthcast. And last but not least, please do not forget to subscribe to my channel on Instagram, which is at The Finance Greek. All right, we are back with Christianne Murphy. Christianne, if for those that didn't listen to the last episode, tell us where you're from. I thought I'd go game show here.
Oh, very nice.
Yeah, there we go. Nice lead in.
So I am an estate lawyer with Underwood Gilhome Estate Lawyers, and we're based in Calgary, but do a whole wide range of estate legal services. So feel free to check us out, and hopefully we'll hear from you.
Love it. Okay, so for those that listened to the last episode and for those that didn't, can get you really quickly up to speed. A lot of conversations we were having. We had you on a long time back discussing about roles of executors, going very granular into will and estates. And then we were just having conversations with clients, and it was decided to scale it back and to say, okay, if someone were to do a will, what are the steps involved? How do we get there? So if you haven't heard it, I would suggest maybe pause on this one, go back, listen to the first one, because then you'll have that continuity. In the last episode, it was the steps involved. Now today we're going to talk about probate.
Yeah.
And there's a lot that goes with it, but we're going to start from the standpoint of the estate is being disposed by death, however it becomes. Well, normally that's how it is, I guess, but why else wouldn't it? But you have to go through the process of probate. Where do you start from legal counsel to advise us?
Absolutely. Okay, so if somebody has died and you think that you might be named the executor, or even if you don't think you're named the executor but you're helping out, you need to make sure that you can locate the will. If they didn't have a will, then there's a different process that you need to go through with the courts. But if they did have a will, then chances are you're going to need to get a grant of probate. And the reason why that's important is because many financial institutions and other institutions, like land titles offices, won't actually deal with the deceased's property unless there is a grant of probate that names someone to make those decisions for them. So it just really gives legitimacy to the individual who's handling the estate. And if there are small amounts, sometimes you can get away without probate. If assets were jointly held, you can sometimes get away without probate. So it's not required 100% of the time, but the vast majority of the time it is required. And it can be a complicated and time-consuming process. So once you find yourself in that position, it's definitely a good step to get in touch with legal counsel and let them walk you through what the steps are.
So you're telling me that we don't have to take that onus and burden on ourselves. I've located first, where is the thing? Mm-hmm. Now I found it. Okay, what do I do? Do I call the family members in a room and read it out in the grand presentation right by the old buffet? Maybe not so much. Okay, so this is good. This is good.
I know. I think a lot of people have in their mind like a movie scene, like the reading of the will. And I wish it was that dramatic. But the first thing you usually do is get in touch with the lawyer so they can help you figure out what the next steps are. In terms of places to look for the will, look in locked cabinets, safes. If the bank will let you look in a safety deposit box, they might have put it in there, even though it's not a great idea, and I don't usually recommend it. If you know that they had a lawyer, checking with that lawyer if they've stored it is another a good option, or the lawyer might even know where the individual has stored it. But hopefully you can find the will if there is one to find.
And is it safe to say, and maybe we touched on this in a previous podcast, that it's okay to choose an executor wisely, maybe include them in the loop, maybe have a family type
Yes.
meeting and understand what's happening so that
Yeah.
you don't have to go through shoe boxes and walls and
Yeah.
and whatever the case may be.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
yes. I know that there was a kind of more old school approach to estate planning in previous generations where you just kept everything quiet. Nobody
Yeah.
knew what was going on with the estate plan until the person passed. But I'm definitely a fan of early disclosure. Let everyone know so everyone's on the same page. Everyone knows what their roles are and what's expected to happen once the deceased is no longer there.
Yeah.
So definitely recommend that so that finding the will isn't a problem. And then once you have found the will, the next step, or it might even be the prior step, depending how long it takes you to find the will, is to arrange all of the funeral stuff. The will might give you direction as to what the deceased had hoped would happen with their funeral. It doesn't always, and the instructions aren't always binding on the executor. They don't have to follow them, but they can use it as guidance, and reasonable expenses for the funeral will be covered by the estate.
Yeah.
So that's another thing that the executor has to do. Then you kind of, once you're getting more into preparing the probate application, you are going to need to identify all of the assets and liabilities and who the beneficiaries are. And you'll need to complete a series of forms, essentially, that are going to tell the court what you're hoping to do now that the will is located and you're named the executor.
Sorry to stop you on that one. And okay, let's run the scenario. I'm an executor.
Yeah.
Do I come to you and say, Christianne, I need to get probate done. Can you help me with these forms? Is it a task that gets taken on by myself? How does that look like? What happens at that point? Who do we turn to?
So when I'm doing a probate file for someone, I do the forms for them.
Perfect. Yeah.
I tell them what information I need them to gather, kind of give them some homework and guidance as to where to find that information. But then once they've found it, I will take care of preparing all the forms and submitting them to court and doing all of the kind of legal work behind the scenes. Sometimes it can be difficult to tell exactly what the assets are, and you might need to get something appraised, especially when it comes to personal items like jewelry and artwork and stuff like that,
Okay.
cars. Real estate is a little bit, you want a professional opinion on what a piece of real estate is worth as well. Obviously, investments are easier to tell the dollar amount of.
Right.
But things like companies can be quite hard to value. So it can be a bit of work figuring out what the assets are. You have to figure out what all the debts are too. So that can take some time and effort to figure out. But once you have all of that information, as well as the information on who the beneficiaries are, then that can all get submitted to court. In addition to information on beneficiaries, you also have to provide information on, even if they weren't a beneficiary, you have to provide information on certain other family members, like if there was a spouse or even a former spouse, the court will likely want to notify them of the situation.
Okay.
Depending on how long ago they were divorced.
Is a lot of that motivated because maybe someone's trying to cut someone out? Is that the real predication?
Yes,
on that?
so you need to notify them if they have a right to bring a claim for family maintenance and support.
Okay.
So there's a specific amount of time after probate is granted where someone has a right to bring that claim, and so it kind of lets them know the clock is starting to run. So if you're going to
Okay.
bring the claim, do it.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. So while you're compiling all of this information, in the background, there are some other roles that the executor needs to be keeping in mind, because their job is to preserve the value of the estate, and there may be some assets that require immediate attention.
Okay.
Such as if there is any real estate, you'll need to make sure that it's insured and locked, that nobody's going to be, you're not going to have a house full of strangers, basically, if you've left the door open, and make sure that the pipes aren't going to be bursting and freezing and all that kind of stuff. So you've got to secure all of those assets, and any assets that are easily movable that might go missing, especially ones that are worth significant amounts like jewelry. Make sure that those are removed from the premises and securely stored, so that a family member won't go wandering in and take grandma's.
You've seen and heard it all.
Yeah,
haven't you?
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So you've got to watch out for that. But yeah, there are multiple moving pieces that are going to require your attention over quite a long duration. So it's definitely important to be organized, as we talked about in our previous discussion about qualities that make a good executor. There are some benefits that you can apply for from the government, like the CPP death benefits, CPP survivor's pension, and CPP children's benefits, that all have quite tight timelines that you need to apply for them pretty quickly after someone's passed away. So keep that in mind as well in the background while you're dealing with all this other stuff.
Okay.
You're also going to need to eventually provide an accounting to all the beneficiaries of what has been done with all of the estate's assets. So make sure that as you're doing all of this stuff, you're keeping very detailed records, essentially, of what all has been done, because that's going to need to be provided in the end. In terms of paying the debts of the estate, you have to be very careful the order in which you pay those. You need to make sure that the government gets its share before you start distributing out anything. There's a very specific order that's set out in the legislation of how debts get paid.
Or you talk to your wealth advisor so the government gets a less amount of its share.
Yeah, hopefully you've planned well in advance with
That's
your
right.
financial planner.
That's right.
Yeah, exactly. So,
But that's good to know, because and to report, because there are various tax filings. Everything has a different role to be playing when the estate lands, from property to liquid assets, beneficiaries, listed personal properties, everything that you've mentioned here. Yeah. It's incredible. And maybe I'm jumping the gun, you might be getting to it, but what is all this that you're saying now, what is the realistic timeline? Because everyone wants things done fast. This is not a fast process, is it?
No, it's not a fast process. So sometimes getting the grant of probate takes a lot less time than you might think. It depends on a number of factors, like if there's backlog at the court, if you have needed to resubmit because the court wants more information on something, if you have just filled out the application in a way that isn't complete, that also causes delay. But now with Alberta's new surrogate digital service, we're able to get grants of probate far more quickly than we used to. So I think during COVID it was taking, around a year sometimes to get a grant. But now it is going much quicker, thank goodness. Wow. So that's great. But the executor obviously has a lot of jobs to do, and I believe there is something called the Executor's Year, where essentially you try to get a lot of this stuff done within a year. Now that may or may not be reasonable depending on the circumstances and the complexity of the estate, but I think that's where communicating openly and frequently with the beneficiaries is important, just so that you are managing everyone's expectations. It's better to be open about that stuff than have them chasing you when it's out of your control in a lot of cases.
Yeah, and understanding the timeline can also take some of that pressure off.
Yeah.
So if we're listening, let's just take it at on the long side of things. It can be about a 2-year process, let's say.
Yeah, it definitely takes that long for some estates.
Yeah, you know, like that could, yeah, exactly. And so to have that and say, uh-oh, panic has set in, I got to do everything yesterday. If you have that realistic timeline of what's going to happen. But I go back, and it's not to continually plug you, but I'm going to continually do it anyways for the sake of the podcast, is that you know the courts, you know the system, you know everything, yourself and your firm. And I think what's very important is, again, like we touched on it on the last episode, we don't have to know everything. We can know enough or have enough and seek out that professional help, seek out that guidance, and make life a lot easier for us as well about what this is actually going to entail and what is going to happen. And it's an education piece.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, how often do we go and put on Netflix and say, hey, I wonder if there's any probate education documentaries on? I mean, it's just, it's not going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, maybe some people's taste.
Maybe.
I haven't seen any myself.
There you go. Don't give too many ideas because
more business ideas.
more business ideas. We can't tell everyone. No, that's fine. Okay, so you know, getting a grant of probate, doing that back end homework that we talked about, that executor's year, quote unquote, where really what you're saying is they're enacting, paying off the debts. Who else are we missing in here? What else are we missing that could be beneficial to someone when they're about to or going through this process?
Yeah, I think it's important to be mindful of some of the complications that can come up as well. If you think that, or you might even know that the will is going to be contested, that can significantly delay the process of completing the executor's job.
Sorry, that's a good point. If you have a feeling that it's going to be contested, would you recommend just hit it head on, get it dealt with right away? Like if we're brother and sister, we're not talking, you're the executor, for example, you know that I'm going to contest the will, or you have a feeling. Is it better just to advise you know what, just approach me head on, get it settled, get it over, because otherwise it just delays it even more?
Yeah, I mean, I think the approach to take very much depends on the dynamic between the executor and the person who is likely to bring a claim.
Okay.
They don't have an indefinite amount of time to bring a claim. They have to bring it within a certain period. So I think if you're not sure that they're going to bring a claim, one of the best options might be to just wait and see, just do nothing. If they're getting legal counsel involved right away and it's looking like, yeah, for sure they're going to challenge the will, then it's important to let your legal counsel know that so that they can come up with an appropriate plan to address that situation. Okay. Sometimes there are estates where the deceased was involved in ongoing litigation when they pass. This is pretty common with divorce proceedings, and matrimonial property is still an issue. So the executor will need to be mindful of all of that stuff, and it definitely delays the process of completing everything. So it's very important to keep the beneficiaries' expectations at an appropriate level when there are any complications with potential challenges for the will, whether it was that the deceased was unduly influenced or that they lacked capacity to do the will, or any issues with the validity of the will in general, but also if there are ongoing legal problems that were already underway when the deceased passed away. That's going to be another thing that could delay the process. So just being mindful of all of those delays and communicating them, I think, is really important.
Yeah, and I just want to point out for the record that if we were siblings, I feel things would go well.
Yeah, it'd be fine.
Yeah, it'd be fine,
great.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah, we'd have a million business ideas and we'd be off to the races.
Absolutely. and that's another thing is, I just happened to be with clients yesterday and we were talking, call it estate planning, if you will, and it just brought up some ideas because I asked them, have you had your will updated?
Yeah.
And so on and so forth. And it brought up some questions, and never thought of that.
Yeah.
And then the questions came, so have you seen that before?
Oh, yes.
Like, oh yeah, we have. And so,
Yeah.
to your point is, what I like about what we've done in these 2 episodes is really setting expectation. I think
Yeah.
the lack of expectation, I mean, if we do it market related, is the expectation of, let's say, what a portfolio is doing in relation to what it should be doing, what the estate obligation is, what the will actually does, all of these expectations, timelines. I think this is invaluable advice. We'll leave it for the sake of time here. We're running pretty much exactly on the 20-minute mark.
Excellent.
We got this down.
I know.
Yeah.
This is amazing.
We got this down. But for any questions, of course you can reach out to me, but I would implore you to reach out to Christianne Murphy as well. We'll leave your direct contact information. Anyone who wants to investigate a little bit further, for those that want for myself to set up the introduction, because maybe comfortability dictates that way.
Great,
Be
yeah.
happy to do it. But I can't wait to have you again.
Yes.
A lot of these are just sparked from, this is what we were hearing. This is what everyone's talking about.
Yeah. So I would love to hear from anyone who has any inquiries or, just general questions if they're finding themselves either in a position where they need to do an estate plan or they've been named an executor. Feel free to reach out and I'll be happy to help.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.